Hello, good morning, and happy Saturday. My name is Meghan Maes. This is Being Civil in Minnesota. I come here every Saturday at 10 live to talk about family law issues, the court process, and questions you may have about the system in the state of Minnesota. I am a lawyer, but this does not make me your lawyer. This is not intended to be legal advice. I do represent clients, but that is something separate I do. This is intended to be a place and a space for people to come and ask questions. You can ask them anonymously, and just a place for support and free resources. Today we got a question from one of the members in the group who wanted to know about attorney's fees. If you have a question, please join Being Civil in Minnesota Facebook group, and you can ask your question. You can ask it to the group. You can put a poll. You can send it to me and I will post it anonymously for you. But then those questions get answered here on Saturday. So, attorney's fees. Having an attorney is an investment. There's no standard out there necessarily for what lawyers charge. The rate that lawyers charge is typically going to depend on their experience and expertise. Sometimes location plays a factor, but those fees are going to be hourly, and that is certainly a question that you should know right off the bat when you're looking to hire a lawyer. For me personally, it's less important for me to know how much per hour a lawyer is going to charge than it is for me to know what I'm going to get in that hour. What are you going to do for me? Because I'll pay more if I think I'm getting more. But if you're just going to say, I need $5,000 and you have no idea where that's going, that would never happen if you went to a doctor or a mechanic. You should know after meeting with the attorney kind of what the plan is and where your money's going to go. Now, obviously, lawyers cannot guarantee at the beginning of a case that it will only cost X. The amount of hours a case needs is going to depend on the court. It's going to depend on the other attorney. It's going to depend on the other party. It's going to depend on how complex it is. And a big part about it is it's going to come down to you as the client. It is a service. And so every time you want to use that service, you have to understand that an attorney is going to generally bill for that time. Now, if it's just a happy birthday, right? I think that would be unreasonable. I would never charge for something like that. But yeah, the time is counted, and a common thing that I hear from people, hey Leah girl, is, do you really charge for every email? And again, as a solo, right? The good thing about working with me is that you get me. The bad thing about working with me is that you only get me. But that can be really good for building rapport and for working with someone. But when I'm on somebody's case, I'm 100% dedicated to that case. I don't like distractions. I want to make sure that I give it my absolute best. So, yes, I'm going to dedicate time to that file, and the time that I dedicate to that file is going to be part of that bill. And if you're somebody that has a lot of anxiety or a lot of maybe trauma involved with the court process or the other party, it can be very, very easy to want to have a lot of questions answered. And a lot of that may or may not be legal information you're seeking. So you want to make sure that you have a very clear understanding about what the role of your attorney is, what they're best going to be utilized for. And if you are somebody that likes to be in contact and that's what you want to do and your attorney's good with that and you want to set that up, I would suggest doing something maybe like weekly. We'll meet Tuesdays at 10. You can bring all your questions because it's important as a client, as a consumer of this service, that it's provided in a way that's helpful for you, but it's also done in a way that works for your attorney. So clients can make the cases a lot more expensive sometimes, and having those initial conversations about kind of what the boundaries and what the roles are of an attorney can be really helpful for keeping those costs down. Generally, each party will pay their own costs and attorney's fees. I keep saying costs. I think we have talked about what an attorney fee is. That's something, in my experience and in my practice, is an hourly fee. There are types of law that will do a flat fee. I will charge you only $2,000 and I will do your entire case. In family law, that's not how things are done. And once you have decided you do want to move forward with an attorney, the two things that you will likely need to do before that relationship is established is, number one, you'll have to sign a representation agreement that will put out all the attorney's fees and costs that will be a part of your case and how those are incurred and how those are billed out. But then there will also be the initial retainer. The question I get from people all the time after what is your hourly rate is, how much is your retainer? Some firms have a standard retainer. They want to say, I will do any case for X. Because the kind of law that I do is very specific to families, and each family and each individual is different, it's hard for me to have a flat fee because I think every story matters. So what I do is I meet with people for 30 minutes. I offer a free consult. I provide them with free resources. And then I try to estimate how many hours I think their case will take. And based on that number, that is how much I decide the initial retainer will be. So the retainer depends on how many hours, how much legal services do you want for your representation. Okay, so that's attorney's fees. Costs are going to be things like there's filing fees for courts. If you need to bring a motion, there's a motion fee. You may need an expert. You may need to get records. There are other kinds of costs associated with litigation that are not just attorney fees, and those costs are paid to a third party. And that's not a cost that the attorney retains. They go to courts or the document provider or the expert. The question I got was, when does the other side have to pay for my attorney's fees? And I will tell you that this is one of the more frustrating areas I find. There's a lot of feelings in the court system that the courts are very overburdened with the number of cases and kinds of matters that they have to hear. I think we could be doing a better job of protecting victims in these court processes. And one way to do that is to make their abusers pay for their costs and attorney's fees. And there's two ways that can be done. Typically in an abusive relationship, there's going to be one party that manages the finances and the other party that doesn't have access to those. That is because it makes it harder for the victim to leave. One way that impacts people trying to leave is they can't afford to go to court, to get child support, to get spousal support, to get access to one of the vehicles, to get the children signed up for childcare. So one way to do that is to say, hey, I don't have any money. They have all the money. Can I get a little bit of that money so I can go to court? And those are called need-based fees. They look at three things. And one is, what is the money that you're asking for to hire an attorney? Is it necessary to further one of your rights? Does the other person have the ability to pay? And do you have a need? And I worked at Legal Aid for over 10 years, and in that role, all of our clients were below the federal poverty guideline. That was a requirement for us to provide representation. So almost in every case, our clients had a need to have the other side assist in the attorney's fees. And a lot of those people were in high conflict cases, leaving abusive relationships or unsafe relationships. And so being able to make that request so that, maybe, because legal aid, we didn't charge for our services, but they could certainly go out and hire an attorney if the other side had the ability to pay. And then that would leave legal aid able to work on the other high conflict cases. I would ask repeatedly, and in my experience, the courts were very reluctant to grant those need-based attorney's fees. And if they were, the amount was really low. I do think there is a real lack of understanding as to how much time and effort goes into high conflict cases. And maybe the courts don't know it's going to be high conflict right away in the beginning, which is understandable. You can go back and ask for more if you do think that your case is going to be litigated for a longer period of time than you initially thought, and you were originally granted need-based fees. Again, in my experience, unfortunately, not utilized enough. The other bucket of, the other rule that courts could look at when a case is being litigated in bad faith, or where one party is unreasonably adding to the expense, or contributing to the length of the litigation, or not following the orders. A lot of the times that's what I'm in court for is, we get a court order and guess what? One of the parties doesn't want to follow it, or thinks they're above it, or that it doesn't apply. That would be a time where you could ask for something called conduct-based attorney's fees. Now, these are discretionary, meaning a court may grant them. They do not have to. And in my experience, again, courts do want to give people chances. Far too many sometimes. And they don't like pointing fingers. It's like, oh, you're the problem. Except for that's exactly kind of what we need the judge and the courts to do, is to identify, this is harassing, this is abusive, they're not following the rules, we shouldn't even have to be here. Can we get that time and energy and money reimbursed because, they're not being reasonable. And civil courts are a court of reasonableness. So some kinds of situations that may warrant conduct-based attorney's fees are going to be non-cooperation. I will only agree to this if I can have, every holiday, or I want Mother's Day, but I'm not the mother because my mom wants to see the child on Mother's Day. That does happen, right? Families all celebrate different holidays differently, but asking for every single holiday is probably not a reasonable position. But is that enough to be non-cooperative? Violating the orders can be one. Unfortunately, once you get to the point where you've brought your motion in front of the judge, you've made your arguments, that could be months. And sometimes the bad conduct resolves itself while the matter is in front of the judge, because sometimes people play nice when they're in court, and then their behavior goes right back to terrible as soon as court is over, right? Covert narcissism, the N-word. If somebody's delaying things, if they're refusing to pay an obligation, but they have the ability to do so, or if they're just bringing it to harass you. And I had a case recently where, to me, it was very clear that there was a pattern and a history of bad faith behavior. And, the court was able to see it and did grant my client some attorney's fees. The court only granted the client enough to cover 3 of the many hours we both spent on that case. And so it was a bit of a drop in the bucket, although sort of a moral-ish victory. But even though this client felt very good about that, it was, it's hard to get a court to say, yes, they should pay every single penny. They would have to really find some egregious behavior, because people have a right to be in court. That is a right that people have, and the courts want to give access to justice, or should want to give access to justice. I would just ask that that be done on a more case-by-case basis, to make sure that people are actually seeking justice and not merely to perpetuate ongoing abuse through litigation, exerting power and control. When you're asking for these things, be specific, right? You can't just say, I spent 10 grand and, it's because you're $70,000 in arrears in child support and I spent 10 grand trying to get it. Okay, well, what did you spend 10 grand on? Okay, we went to mediation 4 times. Great. How many hours did that take? I mean, really lay it down for the court. It took 5 hours trying to get a hold of them through their attorney. And here are those hours in emails. What is different than the need-based attorney's fees is that the other party's ability to pay is not necessarily something that's considered in this calculation, whereas it is in need-based. This is really about conduct. Also, the conduct does need to take place during litigation. So things that happen outside of litigation or while the case is not pending are not things that are going to be necessarily helpful when you're asking the court for this. So how do you ask the court for this? Even if the court is less inclined to do it, maybe we're not asking enough, right? Maybe it's just not as common as I think it should be, to be asking for. If you have to go to court to prevent somebody from unreasonable conduct and behavior, man, I find a hard time putting that burden on the reasonable party, or the one that's, has clean hands, so to speak. And I do wish that courts will look at this issue more seriously. Putting a financial sanction on inappropriate conduct can really curb that other party from thinking about whether or not they maybe want to do this again in the future. And hopefully the answer there will be no. So if you do want to do this, there are forms on the Minnesota Judicial Branch website. You can find those. They're under the General Civil Forms at mncourts.gov. The motion is required if you're asking for fees over $1,000, and most of the times it will be if you have a lawyer, because that's a very small amount of actual attorney time to get to $1,000. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope that this is a trend that we can start to see being brought more into courts and into civil litigation. And we can hopefully clear up some of the courts' calendars by preventing people who are using them inappropriately from continuing to come back. So I hope everybody has a great rest of their Saturday. Please join the group Being Civil in Minnesota. Share this with anybody that you think might have questions or is dealing with a current legal battle and has questions about attorney's fees or costs that you think this might be helpful for. Take care, and I will see you guys next Saturday.